So good evening, everyone. Welcome to what is now becoming a regular Words with a Winemaker. Tonight we're going further afield and we're going to California, which is a real treat. I hear it's quite hot over there, so I'm not at all jealous. We've got sunshine, it's good. So we're off to talk to Bo Barrett about his legendary winery Chateau Montelena. And before I go any further, I'm going to say, guys, we want to encourage you because the webinar format is quite formal and you don't actually have much access to the panel as such. Please feel free to put your hand up, to use the question and answer app. And if you've got something to say at the end, we can pull you into the panel so you can come up and say your bit. We are recording this as well, so we'll be sharing it out. So anyone who's missed this, thank you for tuning in afterwards. So I don't think I'm the only one to admit today that this is one tasting we've been looking forward to, I say, with my 3 glasses of wine lined up beside me. Chateau Montelena is renowned not only for its quality, but for the relaxed and informal way the Barrett family have presented themselves over the years. Very informal, which is so nice, you know, it's very refreshing. I've always admired the wines and was gutted when we couldn't see Bo in person and his son Seamus. But now we've got everyone online and a lot of attendees in here. Thank you, guys. So Bo's just said he's coming back next year for his fishing trip. So we'll have him in the flesh next year. So this is like a warm-up. So let me introduce our guest for tonight's very special Words with a Winemaker. Bo, go for it.
We're in California. I gotta get my helmet off.
Are you okay? You in
We
there,
have a lot of
Bo?
protective equipment in California. You know, we have quite a bit of COVID out here, so we're having to be careful. So got to get ready for this wine tasting here.
Yeah, you're going to need a straw. Ah, no, you're okay. Yeah, yeah.
All right, yeah, no, that's just goofing around. Like here, we don't do this we do this for love and fun. It's making wines and gas. I've been doing it my whole life, and if you can't have fun with wine, you're in the wrong business. But anyway, I'd like to say hi to everybody, all of our friends in Ireland. Like Harriet said, I was pretty crushed that we didn't get to come over. You know, it's my motherland, and we got the Irish passport and everything. So, you know, my grandparents emigrated from the South, from Waterford, basically, and just right after World War I. So, you know, we have strong ties to Ireland. We still got our Irish flag and our Irish parking thing. So welcome. What we do is, because to familiarize with Chateau Montelena and tell the story, we have about a 10-minute presentation. I'll walk you through the winery's history, the winery today, our wines, our vineyards, where we are, and kind of a virtual visit with us today. And that's the chateau that you're looking at. So that'll take a little bit, and that way when we talk about the wines, you'll understand where the grapes are grown and that type of thing. And because it's very, you might not know, as we go through the slides, it'll also explain, you know, my family ownership and all that good stuff. So let's just get started on that. If we're good to go, we good to go, Harriet?
Looking forward to it, Bo. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
I did my homework last night, Bo. I actually watched Bottleshock just because I needed an excuse to sit in front of the TV.
Okay, well, I'm going to answer. One of the questions from Bottleshock will get answered in this presentation. That is the chateau. Yeah, so that's it. That's the whole thing. It's really a quite small winery, and unlike France, where it's the owners, that was never the owner's house. That was a purpose-built, state-of-the-art winery completed in 1886. We get the name Chateau Montelena from Mount St. Helena. So if you look up here, I gotta slide this over here. So this mountain is Mount St. Helena, and you can see we're the last winery, the last vineyard at Mount St. Helena. So the mountain wraps down here, and it gets into our vineyards. And so this is basically Montelena's vineyard all along here. Looking south, we see the winery is right here. I'm on the wrong one. So the winery is right in here on this little knoll. It's a volcanic bubble up here. And these are the Montelena Estate vineyards all through here. And this is the Napa River running down all the way to San Francisco Bay. And where we're located, this is the state of California. And you can see Napa Valley, this little area, and Montelena is right here. We don't have the Riesling today, that's grown up here. But basically, most of the wine in California is grown on the coastal districts.
Yeah.
So in Napa Valley, what's important is that the bay is down here below where it says City of American Canyon. So the Vaca Range, you can barely see it here, it says Vaca Range. These are the mountains to the east, and the Mayacamas are the mountains to the west. The valley is about 26 miles long and about a mile wide, except for down in the South Valley, it gets a little bit wider. So you can see how it gets quite narrow as we get up into the Calistoga district here. Calistoga, what happens in Napa Valley is the wines, especially the Cabernet, are separated by the mountain appellations, you know, Atlas Peak, and all these ones, Spring Mountain, Diamond Mountain, and all that stuff.
I've lost Bo. Not sure if it's us, me, or him. Bummer. Bo, if someone could let me know on the questions and answers if you can hear me, that would be great. Hopefully we haven't lost Bo completely, because I don't know what his screen shows. Someone's saying chat. Okay, Willie, you can hear me. We've lost Bo. This is a nightmare. It's much easier. He's gone. He'll come back in a minute. It's much easier to fix if you lose me than if you lose Bo. So maybe I'll pull someone from the attendees back onto the panel. Hopefully his son is still around to pull him back in there. I think this could be the technical difficulties that happened in his last webinar. I only watched the beginning. Yeah. So guys, you can't even chat between yourselves because you're not in there. If you've got any questions for Bo, obviously I've written one down already, which I think he's about to answer, which is about the cooling influence from the foothills of Mount St. Helena. And we'll wait and see. Hopefully we haven't lost him forever, because otherwise I'm going to have to drink these wines on my own. So I do hope you've all got your Montelena in your glass, and if you haven't, you'll hopefully be rushing out to get some afterwards, because I'll talk a bit about the Chardonnay because I've had a sneaky glass. I keep an eye on my email. No, I'm not in there yet. But I opened it up and it's just amazing. Still so young. The father wants the hat. Might be tricky. It's not like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory when you get the hat back. I might pause the recording until we have Bo back.
4 vineyards. Oh boy.
See, the thing about being online is that it's actually much harder. You have to think about more things, don't you, Bo? Like if you were here in person, it would be like, yeah, just sit down, enjoy the chat. Yeah. Bring us back to the old days, you know?
Yeah, well, it'd be like, yeah, we'll get our horse and buggy. Can you see the original castle now?
Yeah.
The black and white castle. Okay, so the winery was completed. It was built out of stone. It faces true north, so it's in the shade. Okay.
Sorry, I think they're seeing the presenter view. Is that right, Harry?
Yeah. Yeah, we are. So we need to switch it. No. Oh, yeah. Yes, that's it. Mission accomplished.
I'm going to go back to the vineyard. All right, so yeah.
It's the evening.
Good thing it's the evening for y'all. Keep drinking wine. We'll get there eventually.
That's it. My large glass of Chardonnay will be gone.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, so the winery is basically built in the early days of Napa Valley. they built the wineries out of redwood, and it wasn't until later in the 1880s where they started building them out of stone. So Chateau Montelena and Inglenook and that type. And that was what became the fourth largest winery in Napa by around 1890. This gentleman here is Alfred Tubbs, and the name of the winery in the first California wine boom, which was from 1850 basically through till Prohibition 1912, is A.L. Tubbs. That his son having a typical Napa Valley picnic there.
What year was that in, Bo?
That year was about 1890 in that picture. So
Yeah.
the winery goes out of business for Prohibition, and it gets closed down, and the family becomes kind of land rich and cash poor, and they had to grow prunes and other orchard crops during the. So I think you call them prunes too, dried plums or prunes, yeah?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so they're growing other crops, had some cattle. They did have a few vineyards that survived Prohibition, but they're the Prohibition varieties that were not very good. But during the Prohibition, the grandson, Chapin Tubbs, had restarted the winery, and he called it, the orchards were called Montelena Orchards or Montelena Vineyards. And then he started Chateau Montelena in 1932. But the winery went belly up by the beginning of World War II. By 1939, the winery went out of business. So it was a ghost winery. It had been abandoned. And then my family got here. We bought the winery in 1972. So this is my family. This is still basically my brothers and sisters in there. And if you see the guy in the back of the truck, that guy in winery boots with a dog, the back of a pickup, and the cowboy hat, and a big floppy surf hair, that's Bo Barrett in 1972. So talking about Bottleshock, yes, I did have the big mop in those days. And if you come to Chateau today, you'll go to my truck and you'll find my pickup truck with a dog in the back. Same as it ever was.
So are these all your brothers and sisters?
Exactly. My brother Kev here, he's a retired firefighter now. My brother Mike, he was, see, agriculture is really difficult, and the job never stopped. So none of them had the crazy Norwegian farmer gene that I got. None of them went into agriculture like I did. So my brothers and sisters, my sister Stephanie's an artist in Montana. My sister Gabriella is a school teacher on the island of Maui. My mom and dad have both passed away now. So my mom's estate, the winery ownership now is my brothers and sisters and I own my mom's estate. And then my dad's widow, Judy, owns his shares of the winery. And then I personally have a share in the winery too that I had bought as part of my employment here back in the olden days. So it's still family owned, and we managed to survive. Yeah, even with the state taxes and everything in the U.S., the winery managed to stay family owned, even with the estate tax and everything. Basically, my brothers and sisters voted to keep it. Even that nobody wants to buy a house, sell out for big money. We're all pretty happy living a quiet life we live, and none of them want to buy an island of the Caribbean or anything like selling Montelena. And so I have just one more picture of what the winery looked like in the olden days. So that was actually a state-of-the-art winery in 1972. So when we got here, it had a dirt floor and the roof had collapsed, and we had to build the whole place. I started in the vineyard, and by 1973, moved to the cellar. Then when I got to Fresno State, I was the assistant winemaker for our winemaker at the time, Jerry Looper. Our first winemaker was Mike Gergich, and he started Gergich Hills after the Paris tasting. Natural progression. The next guy, Jerry Looper, got hired in 1977. We basically won the Paris tasting when I was at Fresno State, getting my training in winemaking. So then I came back to the winery. My job in 1981, I was designing a winery in Paso Robles. I was down there then. It's now called Ancient Peaks. And my dad hired me to come back in 1982. So I was the third winemaker Montelena from 82 through 2008. And so that's just a picture of me and my dad working together in the olden days. So what happened though in the meantime, I'm going to go backwards a little bit in time. That's my family history of how the ownership is now today. But the history of the winery, an important part was, of course, the Paris tasting. And so that was in 76. So that was our 1973 Chardonnay, the one that's in the Smithsonian Institution, and the movie Bottleshock was about. And the Bottleshock is a dramatization. You can see how young and handsome and not Alan Rickman, the Spurrier, was. He was never very happy with being portrayed as the uptight guy that Alan Rickman played him as, but he got over it. He had fun. And so the Paris tasting, it gets picked up by Time Magazine. And so the Chardonnay, what was happening is we had to replant the entire vineyard. So we bought Riesling as our 1-year wine. We bought Chardonnay grapes to make our 2-year wine. We made Zinfandel as our 3-year wine. And all of those wines were designed to start selling so that we could pay to reestablish the estate vineyard. The estate vineyard was not a single vine of Cabernet on it. And our dream was to build a great red wine Cabernet estate. So the Chardonnay really was a cash flow project. It was a blend of Napa and Alexander Valley fruit. You can't do that anymore. But the style for us was set in perpetuity with that went to making it that very Burgundian style of Chardonnay, which we'll get to in a little bit. So at about the movie Bottleshock, yeah, that's it. So you can see that there's allegedly me with the hair. My hair was actually better than that. That's stringy, straight stuff. And there's Rickman being all snooty. If you want to know the true story of the Paris tasting, we highly recommend this book, and it's at the Winery, The Judgment of Paris by George Tabor. And that's really had the true story of it.
He was the journalist who was there, wasn't he?
He was the journalist who was there. So, of course, the winery is in the National Registry of Historic Places for 2 reasons. We applied for it as the 1888 Stone Winery. This is what we applied for. Then, actually, surprisingly to us, the federal government, the Interior Department decided the Paris tasting was so important that they added us for that one too. We had actually just applied for it for the original Stone Winery. So that's in there. And like I said, the wine's in the Smithsonian. We hand bottled in those days. I ran the filler, so I know that my fingerprints are actually on that bottle that's in the Smithsonian, unless they cleaned it, which they probably have. All right, there's me out in the vineyard. And so in 2013, my history here, I was the winemaker till 2008. My dad, he was a real estate attorney as his profession, and his last big deal, he was going to sell Chateau Montelena. And he did. He actually sold it to this guy named Rabier, who owns Costa Esternel, but it was going to close right during the financial crisis of 2008. So it's my opinion that the entire financial crisis of 2008 was caused by the great Lord so that we could keep Chateau Montelena. So then I came back in 2013 as the CEO when my dad passed away. I had started a couple of brands with my wife, Barrett and La Serena, and I was basically a grape grower from 2008 through 2013. Then I came back to the company in 2013. I was still helping my dad quite a bit, but I was just the master winemaker, and all I did was vineyard and wine design. But then now I'm the big boss, and I got to run the whole outfit. Our 5th winemaker from 2008, we had a guy named Cam Perry. He's now the director of winemaking down at Groth. And then Matt Crafton took over for us in 2015. So he's been making great wine, and he was helping us with the computer. So it's a small company. Well. So he's my tech guru too. So, yeah. But it's a small company. He runs the vineyards and helps me run the whole production side of the company. So the estate vineyard, this is an important slide here, was because now really until Bottleshock came out, we had successfully transitioned Chateau Montelena to be a great Cabernet estate of California. So our flagship is the Montelena estate. And these vineyards here, as I talked about Napa Valley, of course, the volcanic soils are on the mountain soils. And then it gets washed down out of the mountains, the river rocks, and it washes the rocks into the alluvial fans. And then, of course, there's the sedimentary of the valley floor. So on this 100-acre vineyard, we have all 3, which is the most unique and unusual thing about Chateau Montelena's vineyard. It really comes through in our wine. So that's the typical volcanic. It's with that white and the light color that is not calcium soil. We don't have calciferous soils on the North American plate. All the calcium in California, like Burgundy, is west of the San Andreas Fault. So Santa Maria, Santa Barbara, that kind of stuff has calcium. We do not have calcium soils here. So our Chardonnay is grown in a clay loam, so we don't have calcium. This is just an example of what the different soils look like. And that's the alluvium. You You can see that the rocks are kind of washed by water with the rounded edges. So how it works in the vineyard is this over here, this drainage of Napa River comes across, and out here, these are all the alluvial soils over here. This is a little shady. There's some Cabernet. I got another better slide of the mountain. Then we come down here where we're growing the Zinfandel down in our richer sedimentary soils. Again, this is kind of a repeat slide, but basically here's the Napa River. So you can see the different colors of the vines here. This is on the alluvium growing in rocks, volcanic rocks, the volcanics along in here, and then these bigger, richer vines down here in the sedimentary soil. And that's where we grow the Zin. This is a picture of our Hillside vineyards. You can see we're up on the mountain now. There's a steep little vineyard here, a little steep one here, and all along through here is our Hillside vineyards. Another important part of grape growing is the wind and the climate. And this is actually out here, we're looking straight west towards the Pacific Ocean. And out here is a low spot where, especially Montelena, but Calistoga in general gets two cooling systems at night. They have the downslope air coming from the mountain. I don't work in meters, but it's about 5,000 feet high. What's that, 1,500 meters, something like that. So it's quite a bit colder on top of the mountain. The lapse rate that we use, or the adiabatic rate, is 3 degrees per 1,000 feet of elevation. So it's 3 degrees Fahrenheit per 1,000 feet is the temperature shift. So the cold air comes dumping down at night and washes across our vineyards. In the afternoons, we get Russian River air. The breeze blows in here as the hot air rises out of the valley. That next slide is again showing that low terrain to the straight west from us where we get Russian River air. This is a Cab vineyard. That actually is the Napa River right there. Hillside vineyards some are terraced where it's very steep, but for a lot of our hillside vineyards actually go straight up and down the hill like you would see in Germany. And again, so there's the higher terrain to the east. Those are what's called the Palisades. That's a winter shot. We do have extremely good climate here. So it's very cold in the winter. The vines have a good long dormancy. And then when the spring, they're starting to push out. So this is in dormant. These are obviously, you can see the training of the older vines. This is cane prune is what we prefer here.
Bo, there's a question about what the cover crop is between the rows in those vines.
That's mostly mustard there in this particular one. The cover crops are decided. We do the soil test every summer, so they are. Sometimes we just have the wild mustard is in there. That's why that's yellow. But we will put in clovers. We are a sustainable farm, so we do all of our, the compost and the cover crop. It depends what it needs. Mostly we don't use like nitrogen.
This is a little bit worrying. I think Bo's about to disappear again.
Stuff like peas, but occasionally we will use mustard. The mustard does.
Nope, you're there.
It said unstable.
Yeah.
Am I still here?
You stopped for a minute. We missed a bit after the mustard seed, and I sort of.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I got your connection is unstable. So keep trying. We could go.
No, you're fine now. You're there now. Yeah.
All right. So here we're up in a hillside vineyard. Another set of terraces, again, looking at the Napa River and a bunch of alluvial soils there in the afternoon light. This is later in the season.
That's beautiful.
Okay, so now where do we get the Chardonnay? We get the Chardonnay in the southern Napa Valley, and this is called the Dry Creek Drainage. In every county in California, there's a dry creek, I guarantee it. The most famous Dry Creek wines, and, excuse me, the appellation is up in northern Sonoma. But here there's a dry creek in Napa, same deal. You got the drainage coming down here, the cold air coming down from the high terrain at night, washing across the Chardonnay vineyard, which is where it's fairly cool for us. Much bigger area. This is all Chardonnay here, and then this block is Merlot over here. It's all clay. You can see how there's pretty uniform soil. It's basically a clay loam. And that's the Oak Knoll district. Here you can see how much bigger the valley is in these pictures. You can see that it's a couple miles across the valley there to the Baca Range on the east. This is looking east. Same thing. You can see it's a typical shot in the vineyard. We were early adopters of night hand harvest.
Oh,
This is
wow.
just some beauty shots. Yeah, so these are the guys that picking at night. Okay, so in California, we're picking basically right around the first week of September for our Chardonnay, and the days are quite warm and the nights are very cool. And it's not uncommon to have a 50-degree Fahrenheit diurnal, something on the order of 15 Celsius, where it's, 90 or 100 during the day and 40 or 50 at night. In the southern Napa Valley, it's not quite as cold at night as it is up here in Calistoga. But anyway, so we night hand harvest. That's another shot. So we pick into the macro bins. See, these are, again, sorry, I work all in, American. These are 1,000 pounds, half-ton macro bins. And so we got a full one here. And this guy, he's a sorter. He's going through the grapes. So there's the crew is one driver, one or two guys sorting, and then the guys are all hand picking. The crew. The hillsides is too dangerous to pick at night. Go ahead,
What time
Harry.
do they do it, Bo? Do they pick between sort of like 8 p.m. or 12 a.m.?
No, normally they're starting about 0200.
Yeah.
Say started around 2 to get a good 6-hour run in. The crews much prefer it. We actually started in 1995, early adopters with the white grapes, but the crews preferred it so much that it was by 1996, the Cabernet was being picked at night too. And so it's great for us instead of the grapes sitting around getting delivered hot in the afternoon. They're nice and cold, and we show up at 0700 in the morning and the grapes are in the yard, so we can start processing. So the history of, like, when we were young men, we'd be here till midnight, 2 in the morning, because the fruit didn't show up till 5 in the afternoon sometime. So now it's just such they asked me the other day on a Chardonnay article, what is the biggest change that you've seen in Chardonnay over the 40 years I've been making it? And clearly it's the fruit handling, picking at night, good cold fruit, gentle processing. That's been the big deal. But we have to pick in the day on the mountain, so it's too steep, too dangerous. Our Cabernet is really open bunches, small berries. It's hand sorted in the vineyard. So it comes in very clean. So again, hand picked. Goes through, then this is actually a shot of the pumice, so you can see why our wines are pretty intense and really good dark color. Is basically that's coming out, that's what's going to the press. We call that pumice in California. I believe they call it Marc in France. Marc is probably the brandy they make from it. But anyway, pumice. So the winery, we are a very traditional house. All of our wines are modeled on the historic European great wines, the Chardonnay, Burgundy. The estate cab is after Bordeaux, Zinfandel after the Rhone wines. We'll talk about those more specifically. You can see the winery is a blend of tradition and technology. We put in a brand new state-of-the-art winery in 2011. It was completed. So we're basically the third iteration. So the 1972 winery was taken out. So in my career, I've seen the dirt floor in the winery twice. And at that time, we also did our seismic retrofit.
What year was the retrofit?
2011, we moved in. So it's basically all the state-of-the-art stuff. This one's not a great picture because they're installing it. This device here, you hear about wineries using the optical sorters and all that, and we don't do a very long maceration here. We're talking, 5 to 10 days in general, not really ever longer than 14 days, because the wines are so intense already that we don't use seed tannin here. We don't do the long maceration. And this device here is a sorter that replaced the whole hand picking crew that we were using for about 10 years. We had the hand sorter, but then this machine actually takes care of it for us. I think a Roman would recognize this as what this is. For our top wines, we still use basket presses for the estate Cabernet and our top wines. And we also have the more modern presses. This is the Chardonnay press for doing whole cluster. You see these big hoppers here. Just take the forklift and we dump the grapes right in the top of the hopper and it goes right into the press. And so the Chardonnay is half whole cluster press and half run through the destemmer. We like the bright flavor of the destem stuff. The crushed skins make a really bright flavor. So the winery, again, is a blend of tradition and technology, all new tanks. You can see the refrigeration controls are on there and all that good stuff. One important thing we do is we now have, instead of having 12 fermenters, we have 42. So you can imagine how many interns it would take to pump over. 80% of our production is red wine. So there's a lot of maceration. So all the tanks have the pump over device.
How many bottles, Bo, do you produce a year?
We measure in cases. We do 40,000 cases, so 40 times 12. What's that? 4 times 12, 48, 480,000, something like that. We do it in cases here. But yeah, about 40,000 cases. And it's been that size. We've been that size since about 1992, 94. So we operate more like a Bordeaux Chateau, where we're a fixed size wine. We just work on, we don't try to make more wine every year. We just want to make our wines a little bit better every year, or certainly as consistent. So these are the pump over devices over here, where you can see that this tube here is a pump over device. And then it's got a little gentle sprinkler in there. So the thing that now with the modern ones, we can really set the tannin exactly where we want it. The tannin goes to the lab, the tank goes to the lab every day. Matt tastes twice a day, and I taste the Cabernet once a day, as we're building the red wine by the maceration or the remontage.
And do you use natural yeast, Bo?
We don't. I think I haven't said it, but winemaking at our level is the intersection of art, science, and agriculture and farming. Art, science, and farming. And in the science, I am pretty convinced there's actually the wild yeast or cultured yeast that have gone, Cimarron. They're basically every time you can. But no, we don't use it to accomplish that. We use multiple yeast fermentation. So oftentimes, the wild yeast will be more than one running. So what we do to get that complexity when we want that is we actually pick the yeast carefully to work together. The Riesling, for example, is our most complex yeasting project, because making Riesling, all you have is the first primary fermentation. You don't have oak, you don't have malolactic, you don't have bâtonnage, you got nothing. It's like walking down the street in a Speedo. You either got it or you got the first fermentation is all you got. So, but to do that, yes, we use compound yeast, which accomplishes the same thing, only it's much more reliable. We are small, we're family owned. I can't afford to lose any tanks of wine to a bad ferment. It's just, and that's the part of the science side of it. So, the art is an important part, but.
That's exactly what Paul Pontellier said about Chateau Margaux. You can't risk your wine with a bad yeast. You have to inoculate. You have to ferment.
But you can't accomplish the exact same thing with good technical skills. So, for example, on some vineyards of Chardonnay, we want to start them with a weak yeast that will never finish, because then this particular batch is going to go to 14.4 alcohol or something. So you got to have an alcohol tolerant yeast to finish it off. So for us, the primary fermentation really, and the thing about yeast, especially in red wine, it's all the flavor of the grapes. Yeast, it's when you're young, when you're winemakers get all fired up about yeast, but by the time it's bottled and gets to Dublin, the yeast component is basically gone. It's when we're making it, the different yeasts are very pronounced, very exciting, and it's all cool and groovy that you say, oh, look at this yeast is so different. But 12 months later, 14 months later, when you bottle it, most of those components are now gone, and you got to go back and rely on your primary character that you got from your vineyard. At least that's my philosophy on that. Some people really are into yeast. Here, for me, it's all like, what's really special? Yeast, everybody can get yeast. It's how great that single vineyard is what I really want to focus on, or Montelena in general. Everything we make gets barrel aged. We have a mile of wine tunnels to hold all the wine. So these are cab barrels here. So we got a lot of barrels. Even the Riesling goes into barrels. Our new oak is pretty limited. The Napa Cab we're going to taste today runs about 14 to 20% new wood. The Estate Cab about 30 to 40. Chardonnay only 8 to 10%. And the same with the Zinfandel, 8 to 10% new wood. So we do use wood. Again, it's an important part of winemaking. Americans in particular like the sweetness that you get from oak. Americans are really into sweet, and so we use oak, but only, again, our style is not too oaky, especially when we taste the Chardonnay. We don't make the country club oaky Chardonnay. The wine's all bottled at the estate. We have our own bottling line, of course. In the U.S., we bottle and label, and the labels are put on right on the primary bottling line. We don't age them in the baskets like they do in Europe. So the wines are actually finished and sent off to a air-conditioned warehouse down by the Napa airport. We do a lot of large format bottles, for auctions, parties, stuff like that. Okay, enough of that. So like all the good Californians, we're a bunch of granola crunchers. You know, our sustainable farming, that's the way I grew up. Everything's sustainable. We're not certified organic because sometimes that's not the best practice for the vineyard. And it's just a paperwork headache. But the winery is 100% solar. We do make our own compost, all that good stuff that other sustainable wineries will talk about. You know, we got the free charge of your cars. This is an interesting shot for pesticide. These are predatory mites to go out and kill other mites. So actually, instead of using pesticide, we'll use some good bugs. It's a really crazy thing. They blow these little bugs onto the vines with these little gentle fans, basically like a little drone on a trailer. It's pretty funny.
What are the mites called, or are they?
No, I don't know what they're called. We'd have to ask Matt or Dave. They're called predatory mites. I don't know.
What happens if you stand in the way of the fan?
It's probably on that jar. Yeah, no, I'm sure not all of them survive. For gophers and stuff, we have 35 owl boxes around. Our barn owl, it's a really neat animal, a native species that really is good on gophers. It's an owl that has a high hover and a straight down vertical attack, so that it could work. You know, they don't swoop like a normal owl, like you see in Harry Potter where the owls are swooping around. These owls get in a high hover and then just fold their wings and attack straight down. And that's why they don't hit the wires and have stuff like that. The owl boxes. Again, another shot of Calistoga. This is visiting. I showed earlier where the town is down there. Town's just the other side. This is the chateau's on this hill. When you come to visit us, this is our virtual tour today. You walk up the stairs, up here, and the whole upper deck here is our hospitality center. All the winemaking, all those tanks and stuff are inside this door. That crusher and stuff goes right in here during harvest season. There's a visit to the winery. The winery in the 60s was bought, just the winery Chateau alone was bought by a Chinese gentleman named York Frank Wing. And York Frank took some of the grounds of the winery and built basically a replica of the Summer Palace in Beijing. So we have the Chinese pavilions and a lake, and our club members go out and have picnics there. And it's a really kind of a crazy thing to have this kind of Gothic French or, you know, European style chateau with a Chinese garden in front. But it's cool. Right now during COVID, they just shut us down again. So the inside tastings are shut down again. So we're all outside. So if you come along now, get a table here and a table here. So we set out the tables all the way around the levee. And Matt and I go around and host tastings. We paddle around on our paddle boards and talk about the tasting. So that's that one. The visitor center, you walk upstairs to the upstairs in there. This is Sherry. She runs the upper deck for us. So this is our tasting room in normal times. Right now, it looks like the 7-Eleven or the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles. We had to put up the plastic screens and all that kind of stupid stuff. But then they shut us down anyway, so we put all this money into place dividers. They still won't let us do it. Very irritating. But anyway, that's a normal. So that's open to the public. We're open to the public. You can just walk right in. But like any winery here, we have a huge hospitality division where the private tasting. So you go into the chateau itself, into this is in the estate room, it's called. And so there's a lot of private tastings, or the trade. We have the trade tastings, and that's it. So we'll get the wines. We talked about the Riesling a little bit, but today the 2016 Chardonnay. So I think you all have some. I'm going to get a glass here. I've been talking a long time. And if you got any, before we go into the wines, maybe Harriet, if you could ask anybody if there's any more questions that they'd like answered.
We have a question from Siobhan, Bo, about what primary pests and diseases do you have in the area?
Here, we have a really good climate here. I'd say the main thing that we work on is the same as the mildew on the grapes. And so we just use elemental sulfur for that. That's a primary pest. When you're establishing a vineyard, there's a whole nother can of worms, which is the nematodes that live in. We have such variation of soil. So some soils like 100 yards away will have not a single nematode in it. And you can use a rootstock that you like for there. Then you move 150 yards or 100 meters and you got a lot of nematodes. So you have to use a totally different rootstock in there. So the main problem here, we have excellent weather in California, the coastal climate. We have, as I said, the 4 really strong seasons. We have essentially no summer rain. This year, it stopped raining. It was unusual to get some really good production rain in May, a little bit dry. But yeah, the pests, they're the typical vineyard stuff, basically some mites, stuff like that. But if you farm correctly, don't get too much dust. But I'd say, and then there's things like vine mealybug. There's a whole long list of things. Vine mealybug's a really bad one down in the Chardonnay, and that's when actually where you got to take out the vine. The main problem we have here is we try to keep our vines alive a really long time, and then they always end up getting viruses, and so farming getting the vines to work through the virus. But I'd say that's the main three things: is the soil pest, the nematodes. Make sure you establish your vineyard with a good correct rootstock. Once that's done, you can get up. And here in Calistoga, it's so hot. Like here, the main pest in California is this thing called a glassy wing sharpshooter that spreads the disease called Pierce's disease. Pierce's disease can't survive where it freezes at night. So in the northern Napa Valley, we don't have PD. So yeah, we could go for a whole another week-long seminar on that one.
I've got another question about slightly off piste from Rodney, asking, is it true about the parking spot for Irish people out front of the chateau?
I could take a picture. Yes, my truck's parked there right now. Yes,
good.
That's true. It was my dad's old spot, so yeah.
And then Linda's reminiscing. She's saying, you're the very first winemaker I ever met around 2009 in Dublin. So you set the bar quite high, I think, Bo. She's back for more.
Okay, excellent. Good. Well, I tried to get there this year. You know that. I was desperately wanting to go.
No.
But yeah, with the different our Chardonnay is there. We started making Chardonnay before Robert Parker and before the California style was determined. And my dad, really being a lawyer, didn't know that much about wine other than what he learned at the extension class at UCLA, that the great wines of the world are white Burgundy and the Pinot Noir. And then the Bordeaux Chateau and the Chateau Neuf de Pape and the Rhone wines and the German Riesling. So when we started, he said, we're going to make 4 wines. In 1972, we made Riesling and Chardonnay or whites and Zinfandel and Cabernet or reds. And 48 years later, guess what we make? Riesling, Chardonnay, Cabernet, and Zinfandel. I didn't show you on the picture, but we do have 4 acres of Sauv Blanc that we make for the tasting room too. And again, that we make it in the European style, the candy and fig, not the Kiwi style with the grass and the cat pee. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The pipi du chat. But we don't export that at all. So anyway, and we have our art projects. Matt and I, we do work on some crazy stuff. Every once in a while, we'll make some Grenache. I just planted a Grenache vineyard for my daughter, Chelsea, on one of Heidi and my pieces. So that one's called Hell's Half Acre. It's so rocky and hot. It's going to make Priorato out there. But anyway.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, that'll be fun. But yeah, no, but coming to Dublin, it was good, and we had so much fun there. I don't know if y'all know, but I went to the Six Nations, and I wasn't Wales or somebody was supposed to win bad, and the Irish stomped them. It was awesome. People were going nuts. It was great. So it was fun. But anyway, so our Chardonnay, what's different is we don't do a malolactic fermentation because growing in California, there's not enough malic acid to make it indigestible. And when you taste it now, that little bit of green apple freshness that's on the finish, this wine's a couple years old. So having that great finish is a proper acid balance in there. So that's from not doing malolactic. So when you taste our wine, we don't get the butter because we're not doing malolactic.
It's lovely and textural. What percentage, obviously you fermented in new oak, do you? Or fermented in oak anyway?
No, it goes into the oak at about 1%.
Okay.
A lot of the barrel fermentation characteristics you get from fermenting in barrels are actually temperature derived because it's very hard to keep them really cold inside of a barrel because just the way the wood wants to retain the heat from the fermentation. So it's quite difficult to the earliest aromas to break, and they break again about 20 Celsius, even more like 18 Celsius, is you lose your white peach and some of the apricot, some of the more delicate aromas go away on a temperature-based thing. So we do all the primary in the jacketed tanks, and then we don't go to barrels, and most of the gross lee. So we're not using the gross lee either. We're not going to use a lot of those yeast flavors because we're looking for purity of fruit flavors. So it goes only on the fine leaf. So we don't go to barrels till it's about 1%. And the brand new barrels, we will put them in there about 10. After all the heat phases are done, then we go to the new barrels to because we want to take some of the bitter oak components and get it soaked into the yeast, and then they'll obviously sink out during the racking process. But again, we don't do batonnage, we don't do malolactic. It's just basically the purest fruit we can get. And we want to pack as much yummy fruit in that bottle as we can. That's kind of how we see our mission, our shaping. We also make the Chardonnay to age. Obviously, this one's, 4 years old. And it's just still tasting bright and fresh, where, a lot of the pre-aging ones, where you think of our good friends down at Rombauer, for example, where the wines are completely pre-aged. And that's what, batonnage is. You give it, every time you stir it, you give it a shot of oxygen, and that pre-ages the wine. But we don't do that. We actually use them, proper old school Burgundian style, just use time to oxidize the wine.
Yeah, it's lovely because it's very tight, as you say, it's quite young. But it has this lovely savory depth, but it does keep going on the finish. The finish opens up and gives you some of that fruit, even though it's so
right,
young.
exactly. And this one, some of the minerality we get from that clay is starting to come through too. Again, as I've said, the big deal here is like making Burgundian style Chardonnay. You can't totally do it because it's warmer at night, the warmer the day. I say where you could put a Cabernet vineyard is where you go swimming at night in the reservoir. And you grow Chardonnay where you wouldn't go swimming at night in the reservoir because the water's too cold. That's kind of back from when I was a kid. We did stuff like that. Yeah. But anyway, the Chardonnay, it's all Napa Valley. It's the only Chardonnay we're making right now. We did historically make some Alexander Valley Chardonnay way back. So sometimes at auction you'll see those. And again, the bottle in the Smithsonian, the 73 was Napa and Alexander Valley. And technically now it would be Napa, Rush River, and Alexander Valley, because we made that before the American appellation system was developed. But so our Chardonnay, and so that's why it ages. We put it in another couple years. So our design on the Chardonnay is it's going to be perfectly upfront. Everything comes into balance at about 5 to 7 years old is our design. Magnums, of course, a lot longer. I love Magnums or Chardonnay. They age so much slower. It's really great packaging. I surprisingly, as you might find it's not that hard to find enough people to drink 2 bottles of Chardonnay. It's not difficult at all. I have a lot of kids and brother and son-in-laws and stuff, so we go through Magnums at a pretty good clip at my place.
There's something pretty special about a Magnum. It looks more majestic, doesn't it?
They are, and and especially on whites and the antioxidant, it's because of the exposure to air on the bottling is the exact same as the 750. The cork size is the same, so they just age way better. I think. I love Mags.
I think the father had a 2002 Chardonnay hanging around in Magnum.
That's probably worth drinking about now. That's probably good about that. I'd probably drink that.
Yeah, well, maybe he'll open it for Sunday lunch.
Okay, here, how about some Zinfandel? We saw some pictures of the Zinfandel vineyard. Okay, so this 1930s label, this is, you can see it says Calistoga Zinfandel on there. During 2014 through about 2018, we were in replant on the Zin. It had a lot of virus, and it was some of the older vines, and so we only have 2 acres of the 1968 planting here. So our legacy vineyard of Zinfandel is down to 2 acres. Everything else had to get replanted. So that's why we got that label, but it is still in our style. We make it table wine. Many California Zins are very high alcohol, almost port-like. We're talking 15, north of 15% alcohol. So our target is between 14 and 15. Zinfandel wants to raise them, and so it's kind of hard to keep the alcohol down. So you have to be very selective on the picking and the winemaking to get the alcohol moderated. But ours, we typically around 14 and a half. We're trying to make a table wine. Our styling on it is, again, it's a Rhone wine. What we're trying to do is get a big, billowy bowl full of fruit that you can really just stick your nose in there. It's just super lush berries. And then you put it in your palate, and then it just kind of fades away to like berry mousse. So it's not a super strong red wine, but it goes with pretty much everything. And again, California, think about our Asia Pacific, our Mexican influence on our food. So, we do use a lot of spices. It's not uncommon to use a Mexican chili powder with sesame oil. So when you work with those kind of flavors, the Zinfandel is just an amazing wine. It goes with pretty much everything, especially on the spicy thing. And Harry was telling you, you're going to eat some sausages. That'll be perfect.
Yeah. I was hoping one would be bought in, but it didn't happen. But I haven't got them well trained enough. But this is delicious. It's showing a bit of leather, a little bit of prune, and I love the freshness on the finish. It used to be, it could still be my go-to wine on a Friday evening because it's so easy drinking, and it just offers that just lovely complexity. But yet, as you say, it's really easy. It'll go with anything. So you can sit
going back to the rugby game, I would have this with my pig and a BAP. Although I probably have to stick with Guinness on that one, but it would go. the roast pig, because what we have here is the Mexicans make carnitas, which is very similar, the whole pig, roasted pig, the Hawaiians, again, the same thing. But yeah, the Zen, technically, it's a very tactical wine. We do use a lot of our own technology. This one doesn't get the standard pump over machines. It gets délestage, drain and return pump overs or remontage. We do put some Viognier in there, co-fermented like they do in the Rhone with the Syrah. That works really well on the Zinfandel. And if people look at our website or something, they see the word Primitivo. So a lot of our Zinfandel clonal selection is actually called Primitivo. It's a smaller berry selection. So Zinfandel and Primitivo have the same DNA. They're synonyms. That grape basically has two names. So one of the smaller berry selections of Zinfandel, which then makes it less prone to bunch rot and stuff, is the Primitivo. So if you see us say the word Primitivo and Zinfandel are the same thing. Heidi doesn't agree with me, but here, if it walks like a duck and it swims like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck.
Well, I'm on Heidi's side, Bo, because when I'm doing my teaching, I say how Primitivo is just a little bit more rustic in style, whereas Zinfandel to me is a little bit more clean cut. And I don't think it's just the winemaking methods. I think it is the tonal kind of variety, if you like.
Yeah, it's the skin to juice ratio. There's less water in Primitivo, or as the juice. Yeah. There's less juice in Primitivo.
It's just a bit
and
more.
That's why all of our Zinfandel plantings since 1994 have actually been a Primitivo. So we don't plant the California. So we use it. And it would be too confusing. Plus, it's 1973 we started making Zinfandel. Why change it now? It ain't broke, don't fix it. But anyway, that label, it does go back to the estate label. You might have seen in the past, Harriet, where we had the label that looks like the estate cab label. So, because this is non-estate. The Zinfandel after 2018 goes back to estate. So that's why it has a slightly different, with a very different label.
Is that why you didn't save a bottle, Bo? No,
we sold it out. It's extremely popular. Zinfandel in California, it's like up here in the tasting room, we've been sold out of that for ages. Our national sales manager for the U.S. lives in Philadelphia, and we're always saying, get out there and sell some Zinfandel. He goes, only Californians drink Zinfandel, and that's true. They do. We drink a lot of Zin, but yeah, that's why it sells out here.
Because this is for, like a lot of Zinfandel can be a bit frou-frou, a bit fruity, a little bit carbonic maceration, but this is delicious. It's a real
nice table wine.
Yeah, it's really good. I'm
looking forward if you think about Zinfandel, why Zen so popular is because you can make Sutter Home White Zen all the way to Raffinelli, basically, or Larry Turley, essentially port. We're talking 17 alcohol and 2% sugar. And they don't have to label it. It's not even added alcohol. It's not port. They make it at port strength, over 16, naturally fermented, and it's, really strong. So Zinfandel is it's a really good grape. And when we talk about, we're not seeing the climate change effect here at all in Northern California. It's just the farming for me. The droughts were worse in the 70s. The floods were worse in the 70s and 80s. So, it's not the same here as it is in Western Europe, where there's a lot of climate, the weather changing. That's not the situation here. But Zinfandel is very adaptable. So when you got a year where it's super hot and the alcohol is going to run high, Zinfandel will hold it. It'll make it a nice wine. But then when it's a cool year, you can also make a more delicate wine. Again, it's a little bit like a Rhone. It's one of the softer Rhone wines. So it's really
what kind of
how I approach the difference between making white wine and red wine. Making white wine is like painting watercolors. How good is the vineyard is what you're painting on. But every time you touch it, you lose a little something, a little bit of the white. And white, obviously, in any composition is an important part of your composition is the white part. So every time you touch it, you lose something. Then philosophically, how I approach it, the Cabernet is like making sculpture, or red wine's making sculptures, and you can be working in, styrofoam all the way to titanium or granite, but you have that three-dimensional thing when you're making the red wine. It's a lot more, three-dimensional, I guess you'd call it. So when we're working on the Zen, some years it is going to be a little bit more rustic, but like the 14, actually that was, made right in the middle of the super droughty years. And so you can see how we got that one done without too much raise and too much porty characteristic. And it's, we're just very, again, winemaking in the vineyard. You got to know your vineyard.
it still tastes so young, you know, it's lovely. There's, you know, you have the secondary characteristics, but it's still so primary. At the same time, you've got the cherry, the sort of blackberry, you know, oh, it's delicious.
I wish I had some.
Yeah.
Here we're even short. We're sold out of even through the 16 now. So there, you know, that you guys are lucky to have it over there because now it's really drinking good. You know, of course, I have a little bit at home.
Mm. That's lovely. That'll
Okay,
be my.
moving on our. Okay, so moving to the Napa Cab. This is the only wine that's this is our. So in our richer soils, the bigger vines, the difference between this and our estate is basically the yield per acre. So this is not the seconds like of where we sort the estate cab and the number twos go to this. This is a purpose-built product where it's actually grown, planted for this wine. Produces about twice as much grapes per acre as the estate Cabernet does. And so that way allows us to keep the price down from being the, you know, super high price we see in Napa Cabs. We have one vineyard that we buy grapes for this one from. It's just about a mile down the road between us and town, only one family, and they've been growing for us since 1993. So we're into the next generation with those guys too. The Chardonnay vineyard, they've been with us since 72, by the way. So anyway, so this one is, we have some leased land around us that we grow this one on. So it's our bigger vines cab. This one is planted at 10% Merlot, so it is our Bordeaux blend, and then the little bit of Cab Franc, PV, or Petit Verdot we throw in there. This is a little, I don't know, spices, the top agents when they're young. It's so not too long a bottling age. You know, we're into the 17 here in the U.S. right now. Oh, taste of this one. So yeah.
You always have a big vintage variation in my mind. Because was the 15 was lighter, more fruit driven, and this is lovely. It's very brooding and powerful with big dark fruit, little bit of cedar, sort of cigar box. You know, it's a different animal.
Well, the 16 was one of those vintages that we wish they come along pretty much every year. It was a really great growing season, worked really well. There was no difficulties. Like 15 was extremely droughty, super high heat, a lot of heat impact. And, you know, people ask, because then we roll into the 17, when the 17, we didn't make very much. We lost 40 tons. So our vineyard was across the road from ground zero from the famous 17 Tubbs fire. So we lost that 11 acres. That was about 40 tons. And we never picked a bunch off of that. So we didn't make that much of the 17. And so that kind of took a torpedo. That was the bad one. But this one, the 16 was just a really good vintage for everything. They were just all the 16. You taste the Chardonnay. It was a great Chardonnay vintage, great, you know, Zin, everything. It was just one of those years that you get every once in a while. It's kind of like farming in the U.S. You know, you get every 7 years, you get 3 droughty years, you get 3 2 cold years, and then you get that one perfect year. And that, luckily, when the drought ended in 16, it was really, really great season for us. Like this year, we're farming. It's a little bit droughty this year.
It's lovely. It's very restrained. It's very Bordeaux in character, which is obviously what you look for as well. But I love the vintage differences. I sort of, you know, I know that we'll be able to pick up a bottle from every different year and have a really good comparative tasting, rather than with a lot of Californian wines, you know, you're tasting the same every year. You can really get that difference.
Yeah, then because when you get into making wine on the art side, you have to have your philosophy. Do you want it to be the same every year, like Opus? And it's got to be Opus every single time. But for us, we're making more single vineyard wines. To have it say, so 2016, a great perfect vintage is good. And then the 15 coming out, hey, it never got totally right because it was too hot. And you know, the philosophy of your winemaking is important. So where, you know, Heidi in general, she'll make wines that are like perfectly polished as you can, where we actually accept some roughness that would be, or more rusticity that will show that was super hot vintage. And so it might be even a little bit more coarse, a little more tannic, but that's the way the year was. And so that's part of, for me, the interest of the wine of trading. You don't want every single boat out of your shipyard or every single horse coming out of your stable is not going to be the same, exact same. When you're in the custom, you know, hand-built business like we are, you're making these custom hand-built wines for y'all that we don't want them to be identical every single time. But then still have to say they still from the same shipyard or from the same airplane company. It's going to have slight differences, but still show the inherent quality and the commitment of the house.
And you don't adjust your acid, do you, Bo? I remember having a conversation because Heidi's quite open about she'll dial down the pH, as she said. But you, as you say, you like to take it from the vineyard, what the vineyard's offering that year.
The careful farming. No, I will do everything to make you enjoy the wine more.
Okay.
Everything. I will adjust acid. If I have to adjust alcohol, I will. I will do everything to make the wine as good as it possibly can be. So if I need, normally, yes, we don't need to add acid because we're picking them before they're overripe.
Yeah.
But if we did need to fix things up, again, remember I said the trinity of art, science, and farming. I have no problem working on the scientific side. Microbiology, technology. If you go down right next to that basket press that a Roman or even a Syrian before the Romans got there would have recognized as a basket press for wine, right next to it is a crossflow filter, a state-of-the-art, non-consumable filter so that we can send our wines to you. The Chardonnay is not malolactic stable. The Riesling has sugar in it. The Cabernet, we do still use a little bit of Brettanomyces here. That's why we have some of the European styling in our wine. It's extremely technical to use extremely limited amounts of Brett. It's not easy to keep it at the super low levels we do. It always wants to get off the reservation. So right next to our basket press is a state-of-the-art, really fancy crossflow filter that has, again, back to our sustainability, has no consumables, no filter pads, no powder, no nothing. It's just really, so I'll do everything possible to make the wine better.
So Bo, last night I was thinking when I saw the bit in the movie, because I'm such a good girl doing my homework, that the Chardonnay had gone brown. Did that actually happen?
Yeah, it's called pinking. It's a it's a redox reaction. It's pinking. It usually happens. That was the bottling. That was the first time. Those wines were made extremely reductive with astonishing amounts of SO2 back in those days. So the first time it got a little shot of air was at the bottling, and so it pinked, probably 2 weeks after we bottled it, but by March of 75, it would have gone away. And it never looked like that. It was just kind of this weird copper hue. But if anybody wants to just Google it, look it up, pinking in white wines. Yeah, it's typically happens when the browning enzyme hasn't fired off. Because, in white wine, there's the same browning enzyme you get in an apple or a pear. And if you don't oxidize it off, nowadays everybody just lets the oxygen knock it out at the press. So to remake it, we could, but it's uncommon in California. It's more common in Germany, with especially low pH, very reductive style of winemaking, or when they're working with kind of moldy, rotten fruit and they're using the reduced state to fix it, then they pink pretty common. But it's usually in tanks before you even do. Right during primary fermentation, they pink. But yeah, look it up. But it wasn't like that, and it wasn't like the day before the tasting, and it didn't go to the dump, the landfill. Yeah, no, yeah. Everything in the movie kind of happens, but they make it bigger and more dramatic and all that kind of stuff. Except for Sam, the intern. That is a unicorn, a beautiful but fanciful creature. Yeah.
That was going to be a later question, so yeah.
Yeah, no, no, we didn't. We started hiring girls when I was the boss in 1982.
Okay. But I was going to ask. I've just lost my train of thought because I had a child in the background. The smoke issues you've had horrible fires, and obviously smoke taint is a huge thing. I was in Chile, and a few of the wines I tried, they really were showing smoke taint, and apparently it comes after bottling. You don't actually taste it in the fermentation. It actually gets worse after the wine's been in bottle for a while. So even if they think it's not affected, the chances are if it has a little bit of smoke taint, it's going to come out. And you guys obviously don't want to take that risk.
Yeah, we just don't pick the grapes. We didn't make the Riesling got smoked in 2018. It was not detectable, like it was 1 part per trillion, and we didn't pick the vineyard. And ours that got smoked in 2017, we did not pick that vineyard. There's nothing you can do. But if you run it through the crossflow machines or RO, and then you can carbon treat it, you put it back. The problem is the smoke hides in the tannins, and it will always come back. It's all on level. You know, if you had a little bit of smoke, if you're making Syrah or Zinfandel, you could probably get away with it a little bit because they have a little bit of that thing. And now it's basically, yeah, you're screwed if you get smoked. You just have to have crop insurance. You know, in the modern world, you just have to buy insurance. Basically, that's what all of our grower contracts say. We recommend highly because we're not going to take the grapes if they have any contaminant at all. So, but the stuff we grow, it's all of our own risk. So that's an insurance. It's an insurance issue now in the modern world. Yeah, but we'd love to go through another couple of vintages with no smoke. You know, historically, you know, having the 17 and 18. Now, luckily, 19 nothing. I had no problem, and hopefully, same this year.
Because I remember seeing in 17, your vineyards were literally surrounded by fire. You must have been relieved to not actually lose any vines.
Yeah, that's farming for an early harvest. You know, again, especially our state Cabernet, we pick so early. We're picking Cabernet here when everybody else is picking Chardonnay. The yields are so low. And it's only the Napa Cab that runs into late September or into October, where typically when the fires risk is the highest is really late October when we start getting these offshore wind events. So that being early picking, again, the Chardonnay, we picked that in September, so everything could get smoked. But in 17 in Napa Valley, where the smoke was an issue, was the people that had not picked. And, you know, a lot of people said, well, we picked everything before the fire. But actually, in this case, we actually did. And we've been honest about it the whole time that, yeah, we lost the 40 tons. But, you know, we never picked them. But, yeah, they're working on Australia, Washington, California. You know, maybe they'll be able to come up with some scientific way to fix it. But it's kind of pie in the sky right now. It's kind of wishful thinking. But here, other than losing, we lost one vintage of Riesling, didn't get produced. That's about 1,000 cases. But the big money where we took the torpedo was, like in our sales year this year, selling the 17 Cab, the production's down about 18%. So we just bottled that much less of the 17 Napa Cab, the follow-on for this particular wine.
Yeah, no, it's really and so out of the last 4 vintages, what do you think your favorite is for Cabernet?
Oh, I don't do that.
What are the characteristics?
The 16, because of his very little work, you know. A winemaker, he always says the winemaker's the best vintages he ever made is the one he has to sell right now. So, yeah, no, the Cab, it's they've been pretty good since 2014, 15, working around the drought. The ones we take the most pride in are when we really make amazing wines under difficult circumstances, but having it come out like the 16, 17, and even the 18 that we're getting ready to bottle now, they're all you know, show really solid, really good. And they show their vintage characteristic. We're probably putting a little bit more jammy fruit in the last probably 2 vintages. The 16, 17, 18 are going to be more pronounced, richer, bolder fruit. A little bit higher but smoother tannin because we've really got that down. But no, I like the stuff I'm going to make this year. So I was like, the stuff once we bottle it, I don't really work on it. You know, my world is what's coming up next. You know, so what I'm looking at is, you know, it's a different world than what you have here. It's like you have what you got to sell. You know, I'm working on what you're going to get in 2 years, and so that's what kind of gets me fired up is like the stuff you're working on right now. Once the cork's in the bottle, you know, my job is really done. I'm just a wine consumer like you. You say, cork's in the bottle, we're done.
And
this is for those that we don't have it today. I know that you do get this take.
Yeah, we don't, because we're quite low on it, and we were worried if we had a rush, then we'd have outrage. So there is a little bit left, but we're on the 13th.
We're getting scratched.
What was that, Bo?
No, our internet is good. You're starting to break up a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
The internet's getting wonky. Just give it a sec. Can you hear me okay now?
Perfectly. Yeah. You see, the Irish internet is so much better.
Yeah, no, the Estate Cab, the 15, that's our current release. And then, of course, okay, I'm getting unstable internet.
Yeah, you're okay. You're coming in and out, but we're getting most of it. Yeah.
All right.
Is this what you do at the end of every Zoom, Bo? It's time to go, lads.
Yeah, just like that. Exactly. We're wrapping up towards the end. We've been an hour now.
Yeah.
So this is what Montelena is all about. So I encourage everybody to try to get one of these from Harriet too. This is an amazing single vineyard wine out of those 3 unique soil types. 15 was from the Last of the Drought series. They move into the 16. It'll do the same thing. This is an amazing wine, really super tasty and very strong, really focused Cabernet flavors in this one too.
Yeah.
I think
And these are really special because these will keep for sort of 20, 25 years, won't they?
they will, yeah. They go into stationary orbit. We actually, our re-release program is we sell the 10-year-old Cabernet too. So we age it here and then we re-release it to the market, primarily for the U.S. on sale market, but it goes to export too. So you have the opportunity to get the aged at the Chateau rather than the secondary market. The secondary market here is a pretty big deal in the U.S. A lot of, when people get divorced and the wife takes the wine cellar and then she throws it in her garage and then they put it on the internet for sale. So the provenance has got to be very important to us. So we actually age wine for people here at the Chateau.
Yeah, I think
This
the
is
problem
just-
is really
yeah.
important to all over the world now. You just don't know where these wines are coming from. That's a pretty spectacular picture.
Yep, this is in the fall. Obviously, you can see where the leaves are changed on the front of the Chateau, going back to the bare stone. So that's kind of late harvest time. That's probably November, something like that. So anyway, that's the Chateau Montelena story and today's wines.
Well, Bo, I think it's amazing. I remember when you came over last time, I think it was 6 years ago, and we said, oh, we've got to come out there and see, and only the father has been, so we've got to get rid of this fucking COVID and come over on a wine trip.
Yeah, I think next year, but it should be all settled down by next summer. We're hoping, and like as I said, when I told Harry at the beginning that we definitely are just going to push the European tour for next year, and hope they'll have actually more time on that one than I had for this year's one. That was going to get pretty brutal. It was like new city every other day. It was kind of too hectic. So
Yeah.
we'll work it out. We'll definitely get back over there, and like I said, I'll bring Seamus needs to go, or maybe Heidi will come with me. But we'll figure it out when we get there. When they start letting us travel again, I guess would be the word for it. Here, you got to drive everywhere here now. So anyway, like to thank you guys for still bringing in the wine, and I'm really looking forward to coming over and visit it and having a grand old time again. That would be just spectacular. But
It would, because
thanks for the time today. Thanks for setting it up with all of our friends in Ireland. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, Bo, thank you for doing this, because it's a real privilege to have you at any point, whether it's online or in person. And all your wines are fantastic, and I just love the passion that goes with it. You're involved in every little step. There aren't many people who've had a movie made about their wine either, which is quite cool. And you are, even though you're not technically particularly good, Bo, but you're very cool yourself. Jim says hi, my Jim, by the way. He's coming to California to see you with or without me. Thank you very much. I took some little notes here. I did, throughout the presentation, you had a sort of blue wheel of doom going on your pointer, and I thought that it meant your computer was about to crash. So I've been on tenterhooks all through the presentation, but we're still here. But I think, just little insights we've had, like picking at night, hand picking at night. I've never heard of hand picking at night. I think that's extraordinary. And it really shows in the wine. They're really clean, the freshness, the clarity of fruit. It's just outstanding. Pest control, the forward-thinking nature of your pest control. I know you have to be green and sustainable in California, but you guys do go the extra mile. And then I just love this idea, and we're going to hold you to it, Bo. The fact that you go around at your tastings on a paddleboard. We're going to do a tasting sale. And you're going to go and give it on your paddleboard, and it might be raining, but it'll be okay.
Well, that's how we get the social distancing. Is that they have one of the Marines from the tasting room does the pouring for them, and we just come along and talk story. I don't know if you ever use Hawaiian slang, but we do here in California. So talk story is Hawaiian for talking story. The Irish storyteller, same thing, yeah.
I think my father wants to come in and say hello, so I'm going to get him into the panel. Hold on. Here we go. Yeah, we will hold you to it. So you better practice your paddleboarding, Bo. I'm gonna stop the recording now and say thank you for everybody who's listening, and let the father come in and chat to you. Hold on.